Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the teleconference with Admiral Karl Schultz of the U.S. Coast. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Later, there will be an opportunity for questions with instructions being given at that time. Should you require any assistance during today's call, please press star then 0 and an operator will assist you offline. As a reminder, today's conference is being recorded. I'd now like to turn the conference over to Asia Pacific Media Hub Director, Zia Syed. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Julia. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. The U.S. Department of State's Asia Pacific Media Hub in Manila. I'm Zia Syed, the Hub Director, and I would like to welcome our participants dialing in from across the continent and the United States. Today, we are pleased to be joined by U.S. Coast Guard Commandant Admiral Karl L. Schultz, who will be speaking to us from Saipan in the Northern Mariana Islands. We'll begin today's call with opening remarks from the Admiral, then we will turn to your questions. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can during the time that we have, which is approximately 30 minutes. At any time during the call, if you'd like to ask a question, you must press star 1 on your phone to join the question and answer queue. Please note that due to the high number of journalists on this call, we ask that you please limit your questions to just the one question so others are able to participate. Finally, as a reminder, today's call is on the record, and with that, I will turn it over to Admiral Schultz.
Okay, thank you, Zia, for moderating today's call, and good afternoon or good morning to some of those on the call today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you a little bit about the Coast Guard and the U.S. commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. I'm pleased to be in Oceania, and more specifically, actually on the ground in Saipan as we're doing the call. The Oceania is what I define as the Pacific Island nations and territories that span the region between Hawaii and Australia, including those U.S. territories of American Samoa, Guam, and the Northern Marianas, to solidify long-standing relationships. Here in Oceania, the Coast Guard is uniquely situated to assist partner nations uphold and assert their own sovereignty while protecting our national interests. Many Indo-Pacific nations lack the capacity and capability to fully police their sovereign waters, making them vulnerable to narcotics trafficking, human smuggling, illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, piracy, and terrorist activities. In the face of coercive and antagonistic behavior, the United States Coast Guard offers transparent engagement and partnership. Our specialized capabilities and expansive international relationships enable us to build partner nation capacity and model the rules-based values and behaviors that we want to see in the region. Through engagement, partnership, and presence, we are a maritime bridge between the Department of Defense's lethality and the State Department's diplomacy. My goal for the Coast Guard is to be a partner of choice in the region. So we tailor those services, our services, to the needs of the nation we are supporting. Our long-term commitment to capacity building spans a range of Coast Guard expertise, including the transfer of cutters through excess defense articles, multinational security exercises, bilateral search and rescue and law enforcement agreements, the hosting of ship fighters on Coast Guard vessels, and the deploying of training teams to share technical expertise and to build proficiency. We also lend our expertise directly to partners in order to enhance maritime safety, security, and environmental protection through activities such as aids to navigation sustainment, fisheries enforcement, and environmental protection regulatory activities. Counter-drug patrol is working with what we call Joint Interagency Task Force West, which is commanded by a Coast Guard 2-star flag officer, in advancing American prosperity by facilitating secure ports and waterways and ensuring the free flow of global maritime commerce. The U.S. Coast Guard has an enduring role in the Indo-Pacific region going back over 150 years, and our commitment today is as strong as ever. In the last year, we have deployed 2 of our flagships, the National Security Cutter Stratton and Berthoff, in support of the Department of Defense Combatant Commander, the Indo-Pacific Commander. Our enduring role is not to replace or duplicate Department of Defense assets or capabilities, but to employ our unique authorities and capabilities to complement Department of Defense forces. Featuring sophisticated command and control systems, these national security cutters deploy globally to strengthen maritime governance, advance national collection requirements, and confront threats to the United States of America. We also demonstrate our enduring commitment to the region by home porting 3 of our new assets, the fast response cutters, in Guam in the next 2 to 3 years. We broke ground yesterday in Guam on what we call the maintenance support building, and that building will support these assets operating in the Oceania region. The Coast Guard enjoys a truly great relationship with our territorial and federal partners in the region, which which we reinforced through the dedication of this building, honoring a local hero, a former governor, matter of fact, the first non-military governor in Guam. The addition of this fast response cutter, the 3, will significantly increase Coast Guard presence throughout the region. Our increased capability and capacity will allow for more frequent and longer patrols to protect the exclusive economic zone from illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing and the threats that those activities bring, as well as increasing drug trafficking threats to the region. My vision for the Coast Guard is to expand our permanent presence and effectiveness in the region through expeditionary capability, which is why we are doubling down in Oceania. In the next month, we will be deploying Coast Guard assets in a new operating concept to strengthen the community of island nations through Operation Ainga. That's Samoan for family. An initial 30-day deployment of multi-mission cutters, including a 225-foot buoy tender and one of these brand new fast response cutters, will provide specialized capability to our partners in the region. With this small footprint, we will deliver variety and convenience to their doorstep, tailored to the needs of each island nation. In summary, the Coast Guard has an enduring and specialized role in this region, and we are proud to be operating with our Pacific partners to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific, where individual sovereignty is protected. I look forward to your questions and appreciative of the dialogue today. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. We'll now begin the question and answer portion of today's call. For those asking questions, please state your name and affiliation, and please, if you can, please limit yourself to just the one question. You can also submit your questions via email, asiapacmedia@state.gov, or by pressing *1 on your phone. If we could please go ahead and start with Mackenzie Smith from RNZ Pacific in Auckland. Please go ahead, Mackenzie.
Hi, thanks for your time, Admiral. I just have 2 questions. The first you might not be able to answer. Tonga is investigating a Turkish-flagged ship which allegedly severed its undersea internet cable in January. So I'm wondering if the Coast Guard is aware of this incident or any activities of this kind by Turkey. The other is the North Korean ship detained in American Samoa. I'm wondering how long that's expected to stay there and if there's any plans to move it. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. On the first question, the Tonga question there, I am unfamiliar with that. In terms of the ship in American Samoa, that is a situation that I am familiar with. The Coast Guard was involved with international partners there with U.S. interests in that ship, the Wise Honest, and we had some, what we call our deployable specialized forces folks in American Samoa when that ship arrived to help with the security aspects of that. We've since walked back that participation, but that activity, in terms of how long the vessel will stand there, I don't know. The vessel is, being held there, subject to seizure, and that's not something that's probably more in the purview of the Department of Justice than me to speak to.
Thank you, Admiral. Next we'll have Kiara Zambrano from ABS-CBN Broadcasting Corporation in Manila, Philippines. Kiara, please go ahead.
Good morning, Admiral. As you know, in the South China Sea, the gray ships of the various navies here have essentially been paralyzed just by the dominant presence of the white ships, the white ship strategy employed by the Chinese Coast Guard. Now that you've said that you will be making more frequent and longer patrols in your concerned EEZs, we'd like to know concretely in what ways will the U.S. Coast Guard presence be felt in terms of paralleling or equaling or countering the dominant Chinese Coast Guard presence in these waters?
Well, I appreciate the question. I mean, the way the Coast Guard is supporting regional operations is we, at the request of the Indo-Pacific Commander under the Department of Defense, we have surged, like I said, one national security cutter deployed from about January until mid-June. That was the Coast Guard cutter Berthoff. We have a national security cutter, the Stratton, in the region today. We provide those forces to the Pacific Fleet Commander, who works under the Indo-Pacific Regional Commander. Those cutters are under the Navy's tactical control and are applied to the regional threats as best deemed necessary by the operational commander. Our ships in the region, the Berthoff was involved in some sanction work in its early time in the region against the DPRK. They did participate alongside a Navy ship in a Taiwan Straits transit. The Stratton will be doing some work in the Oceania region. Bertov, the first ship, did some joint search and rescue exercises alongside the Philippine Navy. So it's a range of operational activities. Again, our presence there is to model, maritime governance. I think when you think about the United States Coast Guard, our iconic racing stripe that defines our white ships, that you see that branding replicated all over the world, including the Chinese Coast Guard. What we think we bring is appropriate behavior, following international protocol and following free and open rule-based mindset. And we're hoping the Coast Guard presence there will reinforce that as an important national U.S. interest, and really how the international norms should be established and reinforced.
Thank you, Admiral. Reminder to everyone, if you would like to join the question and answer queue, please press *1. Next, we have Catherine Tilley from the Financial Times based in Taipei. Catherine?
Thank you. Admiral, I wanted to ask a question about the South China Sea in a little bit more concrete terms. We have had a standoff going on around Vanguard Bank involving Chinese Coast Guard ships. Could you tell us whether the U.S. Coast Guard believes that these activities of the Chinese Coast Guard vessels, or part of them, are occurring inside Vietnam's EEZ, and whether the U.S. Coast Guard has a role or intends to or plans to have a role in countering this coercive behavior? Thank you.
No, while I appreciate the question, I really need to defer that to the commander of the 7th Fleet and the Indo-Pacific Commander. We are providing forces at the Department of Defense's request to operate in the theater. I am not involved in the tactical operations of those platforms once in theater. What we have done is we've transferred some former high-endurance cutters. They're 378-foot Hamilton-class cutters to the region. We've transferred cutters to the Philippines, transferred 378 to Sri Lanka. We transferred them to Vietnam. Those are capabilities that the host nations should be able to develop and use to project their own sovereign interests in the region.
Thank you, Admiral. Next we have Lon Vu from PhoBolsaTV. Lon, please go ahead.
Yes, my question is also regarding the standoff in Vanguard Bank. I would like to know
Lon,
if...
Are you there? If not...
Yes, I am here. Do you hear me?
Can we please go ahead and go to Brad Lendon from
Hello?
CNN next?
Hello?
Brad Lendon?
Hello? Hello?
In the announcement for this teleconference, we would talk about Chinese expansion into American territory. And I wondered if you could give some more details on what that Chinese expansion into American territory is.
Well, I think I would say being here in the region, in Guam, in the Commonwealth of Northern Mary Islands, had a meeting here in the recent day or so with the U.S. Ambassador to the Federated States of Micronesia. There are clear indicators that the Chinese are operating in the region. If you think outside the second reef line here in places like Yap, we're seeing additional presence, and I think that is a factual finding. And again, the Coast Guard, we are a domestic-based organization with global reach and global capabilities, but there's a capacity limit on that. So we have been here in the Pacific. We work on a very local level. One of my key notes of my visit here was with what we call a sector command in Guam. They do search and rescue, environmental protection, some enforcement of the IUU fishing we talked about earlier. They are our eyes on the ground, our presence on the ground, and sitting on the ground in Saipan today, you can see clear indicators of influence in the region, financial interest in the region. I think what we're looking at with some of the island nations, the partners, is to be a partner of choice, to offer the exchange of capabilities and professional exchanges with the regional partners.
Thank you, Admiral. Can you next we'll go to Doi Lin Hong from Tua Tre newspaper. Doi Lin, are you there? Nguyen Hong, are you there? Okay. If not, let's please go ahead, if you can, please open the phone line for Dong Kyun Kim from Voice of America.
The Coast Guard is also engaging in North Korean illegal ship-to-ship transfer issue. I have a question regarding this matter. The illegal vessels, especially those trading with North Korea, have been using AIS signal-off tactics to face off their navigational records. How is the Coast Guard counteracting with such illegal activity? And some say these are used for ship-to-ship transfer in international waters, but some experts point out, while these AIS signals are off, these ships directly enter North Korean ports for trade. Does the Coast Guard have any concerns about the possibility of AIS signal off vessels directly entering North Korean seaports for illegal transactions?
So regarding the question about AIS and AIS carriage, AIS display, I don't have the specifics. I believe, I've heard reporting of vessels operating, to mask their location with AIS secured. That is in violation of international agreement based on the size of ships and locations. That said, I think those specifics are better deferred to probably the 7th Fleet, the Indo-Pacific Commander. But what I mentioned earlier, and I'll reaffirm, is our national security cutters have been involved in that sanctions enforcement effort against the DPRK here in recent months.
Thank you, Admiral. Next, if we can go to Zirhan Mahadzir from USNI News. Please go ahead, Zirhan.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Admiral. Quick question. I would like to ask, in the past, the U.S. Coast Guard used to be part of the Cooperation Afloat and Readiness Training exercise, but that has since been discontinued. With the added presence of Coast Guard ships, do we see a return of them to such exercises?
Well, let me use for an example, you look at the Rim of the Pacific, RIMPAC, which is one of the largest exercises on an annual basis. The Coast Guard has been a continued participant in RIMPAC. We participated with a national security cutter here last year. There was a year or so when we took the gap and we sent what we call some of our deployable specialized force folks to participate. I anticipate here in the upcoming RIMPAC, we will again be participating with a national security cutter. So we are committed to the international exercises, the partnerships, the collaboration, the signaling of a shared commitment to, free and open oceans, specifically a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Thank you, Admiral. If we can next go to Juan Carlo Gotinga from Rappler News. Juan Carlo, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Admiral. Thank you for taking this question. China has increased its naval presence in the South China Sea, and the U.S. has been very clear about its emphasis on freedom of navigation and overflight in the area. So my question is, in what concrete ways can the U.S. Coast Guard help push that objective of the U.S.? And also, are there any future plans that are imminent with other claimant states in the South China Sea to help them also push forward their right to freedom of navigation and overflight?
Well, let me walk it from the second question first. In terms of other claimants in the region, we are collaborating, working very diligently with the Vietnamese as the Vietnamese build out their Coast Guard multifold. I've hosted Vietnamese Coast Guard leadership recently. Obviously, they have to work on a very careful relationship front there in the region, being neighbors to China. We've worked with the Malaysians, the Indonesians, helping them build out their capacity. With the Philippines, I mentioned in response to one of the earlier questions, we've transferred former high-endurance cutters to what we call the U.S. Excess Defense Article Program, to the Sri Lankans, to the Philippines, to the Vietnamese. So those are very capable ships. So, I think that's a key place where we're talking about other claimants in the South China Sea. For us here, it again, amped up level of participation, supporting the Indo-Pacific Commander, showing, that behavior, the model maritime governance that supports rules-based order, free and open access to the sea lines of communication. we think a Coast Guard contribution to that is important.
Thank you, Admiral. Next we'll go to Don Latan from Zing News. Don, please go ahead. Are you there, Don? Okay. If we're not able to connect with Don, can we go ahead and try one more time? Because he's still on the line with Lan Vu from Bolsa.
Yes. Do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My question is also regarding the situation in Vanguard Bank. So the U.S. State Department already expressed their concerns about that situation recently. But if the situation escalates in the next few days or weeks, the U.S. will take any appropriate actions regarding that? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to defer that question, Admiral Schultz here, I think, to the State Department, to our regional colleagues. That's an operational, tactical sort of current operations question that, as a force provider to the region, as a partner in building capacity in the region, that's not really in my lane to answer. I apologize for that.
Good, Admiral. Thank you. Next, if we could go to Pei-Fen Cho from Up Media. Pei-Fen, please go ahead.
Thank you. My question is that U.S. Coast Guard patrol ship crossed Taiwan Strait earlier this year, and in addition to practicing the right of freedom of navigation, does USCG discuss with the Taiwan government about the cooperation in humanitarian aid in the South China Sea?
I did not copy the latter part of that question. I apologize. I understood the part about the Coast Guard did participate in the Taiwan Strait transit. That is a true statement alongside a Navy combatant, but I did not understand the second part of the question.
I believe it was that the U.S. Coast Guard is coordinating and cooperating with the Taiwanese government.
We take our lead in the region here, working under the Indo-Pacific Commander in terms of the collaboration with the Taiwan government. I'm going to leave that specific answer to the State Department and the regional commander on that.
Thank you very much, Admiral. Next, we'll go to Megan Tobin from the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. Megan, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks very much, Admiral. Recently, the Acting Secretary of Defense has made some comments about increasing the agility of U.S. military and law enforcement forces in the Pacific, and some have interpreted that to mean increased military bases, but I'm curious how you see the Coast Guard fitting into, new ways of military and law enforcement activities, particularly around the U.S. Pacific territories.
Sure. I think in the latter part of your question about the U.S. Pacific territories, I think our intention here would be to offer ourselves as a partner of choice to the Pacific Island nations. We have the capability to help them protect their sovereign interests. You look at the GDP, it's the gross domestic product of many of these island nations. They're derived from the sea. When you look at foreign encroachment on their fishing, that is of concern. When you look at economic investment, we don't have to look too far around the world to see places where economic investment, has turned into ownership of ports and things like that. So I believe the Coast Guard, continue to contribute to some degree to the conversation we've had in large part about South China Sea, East China Sea. But I think really a sweet spot for us would be operating at a partner nation level. We intend to send a buoy tender. It's a 225-foot ship with a patrol boat down to to American Samoa in the coming weeks here for an extended patrol. It's a little bit of a proof of concept. I anticipate that mothership type operation with some patrol boats, maybe trying to lash up with Australian partners and New Zealand partners in the region, Japanese partners, really is that international face that offers an alternative to other actors in the region.
Thank you, Admiral. And we're just about running out of time. We'll just try to sneak in one or two more. Well, I'll try one more time for Dui Lin Hong from Trey newspaper. Dui Lin Hong, are you there?
Yeah, I'm speaking.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, Admiral. There are some skeptical opinions that the U.S. does not have an effective strategy to deal with China's raison strategy. What do you think about this? And also, facing recent China aggressive activity, especially in South China Sea, how will the U.S. respond to this? I mean, about the internal device, hearing, or whatever. Thank you.
Yeah, can you help me maybe with that question? I had a little bit broken in my ability to hear. Can you help me maybe?
Yeah, he was asking for U.S. strategy to counter China in the South China Sea and their skepticism about the U.S. strategy.
Well, again, that's
aggressive actions by the Chinese. And
I mean about the raison strategy of China.
Yes. Okay.
I would say, in terms of the strategic approach there, I think, obviously we're in a national strategy, security strategy here in the nation, a national defense strategy that's focused on competing global powers. I think, as the Coast Guard Commandant Service Chief, as I look across the globe, the maritime globe, the commons, the Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, we are absolutely in support of free and open sea lines of communication in international waters. We're open to resolving disputed territorial claims in the appropriate, international court venues. So, strategy, I think, is to show that as a nation, the United States government, in a region of the world that's critically important to the free movement of commerce. When you look at the volume of economic activity that fuels prosperity in the region that happens in the Indo-Pacific, the South China Sea, East China Sea region, that's critically important to U.S. interests, to international interests. And again, the Coast Guard contribution, as I said, is we have a certain recognized global demand or global brand. And I think us participating in the region, from partnership capacity building to the higher end stuff, steaming with our Navy colleagues, is all important to signal to regional actors that we are serious, we are committed to that free and open, rule-based values and behaviors in the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you, Admiral. If we can, we'll just do one last question, which is we'll go to Chiara Zambrano from ABS-CBN Broadcasting. Chiara, please go ahead.
Hi, Admiral. I'd just like to go back a bit in relation to my previous question, and I think it's also related to the one that you just answered, because essentially China Coast Guard presence has been a presence of domination. It's been a game of numbers and physical assertion of its presence. How do you see the strategy that you mentioned of you being a model using far less vessels in the area, a model of good behavior, seeing that China hasn't even been following international court decisions? How do you see your strategy being more effective as opposed to perhaps going toe-to-toe and playing by the numbers game in the South China Sea?
Well, I would think what we would champion is transparent engagement. I think when China Coast Guard has grossly increased its number of ships. There's the PLAN Navy, China, Central Government Navy. There's the Chinese Coast Guard, used to be under civilian authority. It is now, through the People's Military Police, a direct report to the CCP government. You look at the maritime militia. I think we have seen behaviors out of the Chinese Coast Guard, out of the maritime militia, that are not consistent with, the rule-based order. And I think the Coast Guard voice, the U.S. Navy voice, allied partners, regional partners, neighbors, I think there needs to be an international pushback to say, we reject the types of behaviors, the antagonistic, aggressive behaviors that are not consistent with the rule-based order.
Thank you very much, Admiral. And with that, we will conclude today's call. I apologize if we were not able to get to your question. We tried to get to as many as we could. I want to thank U.S. Coast Guard Commandant Admiral Karl Schultz, and I also want to thank all of our callers for participating. Please stay on the line for information regarding access to an audio recording of the call. Also, please be aware that a transcript of the call will be posted to our social media platforms and sent out to all of you within a day. If you have any questions about today's call, you may contact the Asia Pacific Media Hub at asiapacmedia@state.gov. Julia, if you could please go ahead and talk about the recording. Thank you very much, everybody.